It won't be my last one. Well, when you have children, it's more or less a given you've got to name them. And sometimes coming up with names for your children can produce arguments and disagreements and compromises and all kinds of things. With our 3 children, we came up with names we agreed with, and I think they worked pretty well for the kids. Angela Marie was Debbie's mother's middle name. Andrew Thomas, we named him after somebody. And then Christina Lee, her middle name was my mother's middle name. When our children started having children, we weren't always sure about some of the names they picked, and I won't name any one in particular. Not that he will probably see the sermon, but just some interesting names. But that's kind of the trend today, isn't it? Children have some of the most interesting names today. Let's just see what we can do to be different. But as you think about all the people you know, have you ever encountered anyone named Ahab or Jezebel? Now, it seemed like there was an Ahab in a novel back there somewhere. But who would name their daughter Jezebel? Those names have all kinds of bad baggage with them. Ahab was the 8th king of Israel. He reigned for 22 years. He was politically strong, but religiously weak. We're mentioned that is made of him in 1 Kings chapter 16, verse 30. He reigned in Samaria over Israel 22 years. He did more evil in the eyes of the Lord than any of those before him. He was a wicked king. And much the same kind of thing is said in verse 33 as it follows up. Explains in part, he made an Asherah pole and did more to provoke the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger than did all the kings of Israel before him. So he broke the mode in his reign for wickedness. He was evil. He sinned in marrying Jezebel. Israel was not to marry pagan wives. He built an altar and a temple to the god Baal. Then there's Jezebel. She was raised a Baal worshiper, and she tried to impose the Baal worship on Israel. She slew all of God's prophets that she could. 450 prophets of Baal sat at her table. Now that's a lot of folks to feed, isn't it? She threatened Elijah's life after the slaughter of the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel. The wicked lives of Ahab and Jezebel provide many warnings about the dangers of sin. And one of the most striking examples is found in 1 Kings chapter 21. This incident teaches a clear lesson on the sin of covetousness. We first see the conception of covetousness. This is 1 Kings chapter 21, beginning with verse 1. Sometime later, there was an incident involving a vineyard belonging to Naboth the Jezreelite. The vineyard was in Jezreel, close to the palace of Ahab, king of Samaria. Ahab said to Naboth, "Let me have your vineyard to use for a vegetable garden, since it is close to my palace. In exchange, I will give you a better vineyard, or if you prefer, I will pay you whatever it is worth." But Naboth replied, "The Lord forbid that I should give you the inheritance of my fathers." So Ahab went home, sullen and angry, because Naboth the Jezreelite had said, "I will not give you the inheritance of my fathers." He lay on his bed sulking and refused to eat. As we consider this subject of covetousness, let's define the term first. What is covetousness? Well, it is to desire intensely. It is to wish for enviously. To desire beyond reasonable limits what belongs to another. The word has various shades of meaning. Now, simply desiring something is not coveting in the bad sense of the word. I've even heard people say, I covet your prayers, but there's no evil intent there. But the sin of covetousness is a desire that's gotten out of hand. The desire is given more than human and common importance. In Exodus chapter 20, verse 17, one of the 10 Commandments says, you shall not covet your neighbor's house, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male servant, or his female servant, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. A great deal of Old Testament law was intended to counteract the spirit of covetousness. Covetousness leads to other iniquities. Any means will be used to obtain the coveted object. There can be theft, all kinds of things going on, even murder. We notice the development of covetousness in the case of Ahab. There was a possession that belonged to someone else. Naboth owned a vineyard next to Ahab's palace. And this may have been Ahab's alternate palace. At any rate, here is Ahab, a man of great wealth, but he did not own this particular vineyard. Naboth did. Now, we own only a small part of this world's possessions. The richest person we can think of really owns a small percentage of anything in the country in which they live. We think of Sam Walt and others that had great wealth. But relatively speaking, they owned a very small percentage of things. There were some things they did not own. And as we think about ownership, we are limited, of course, by what we can afford. We're also limited by what we can use. We're limited by what is for sale. A first step toward covetousness is to forget that others have a right to their property, just as we have a right to own things ourselves. An offer was made for the possession here in 1 Kings. Naboth says, I want this vineyard for a vegetable garden. I will give you another vineyard, a better vineyard, or if you want, I'll give you money for it. Offer was made for the possession. Now, there are many good things we want. In this case, it was a vineyard. You know, sometimes we want a new house, a car, might want an education, might want a promotion at work. There are good things that we can want in life. And there are many good reasons for wanting a certain thing. It may be for convenience. That was the case with Ahab. This plot is close to my house. There's usefulness. I want to have a vegetable garden. If we desire something we don't have, we can try to obtain it in a legitimate way. We can offer to buy it. We can earn a promotion at work by doing good work. We can receive a diploma by studying hard. Ahab did make a good offer. The person would actually profit by what he was offering, a better vineyard or the price of it. But there was a refusal to sell. The owner can always refuse to sell. That's his privilege. And so, the one who wants to buy can either offer more or he can look for something else. But this was more than just a personal wish with Naboth. Notice that he says, the Lord forbid. If Naboth sold his vineyard to Ahab, he would be breaking God's law. In Leviticus and in Numbers, there were regulations about the selling of property. If you had inherited property, it belonged not to the individual but to families. Naboth would wrong his descendants by selling this piece of land. The bottom line is we cannot have everything we want. It may belong to someone else. Well, what is the reaction of King Ahab to the refusal by Naboth? Now, here is a powerful king, a rich king. He has all kinds of things. But he was sullen and vexed. Have you ever been vexed? He lay down on his bed and turned away his face and ate no food. Ahab accepted Naboth's refusal, but responded with childish grief and pouting. I think we all remember our children pouting on occasion. All three of ours did, and they came by it naturally. They got it from their father. You didn't think I was going to say mother, did you? They got it from their father. All of us at some time in life have pouted when we did not get our way. Hopefully, at some point, we start outgrowing that. Here is a king, and he's basically pouting because he wasn't able to buy this one vineyard. Ahab's reaction shows that his desire for property had become too important. A lot of us are like Ahab at times. The husband won't buy his wife a new couch. She says, "Oh, I've got a sick headache. I can't cook supper for you tonight." The wife won't give the husband a second piece of cake that he doesn't need. He'll pout and act miserable. We've probably known people who made themselves literally sick when they didn't get what they wanted, when they didn't get their way. Some of them even had to go to bed. Well, this attitude damages and destroys relationships, including those in church. We know of the little child who says, "If I can't be the leader, I won't play." And some church members are like that. There have been those who said, "I want to be the teacher, not the pupil. I want to stand in front, not sit in the pew. I want to do things my way and not the Lord's way." There have been those who've said, "If you don't do things my way, I'm going to throw a fit and go somewhere else." I've been in ministry now for many, many years. Ministers come up with ideas of how to do things in church. And as you deal with elderships or deal in the setting of a men's meeting, you need to learn pretty quick that sometimes when you make a suggestion, and it may be a very good suggestion, that somebody's going to say no. We're not going to do it that way. And you have to learn from that. Well, maybe your idea wasn't as good as you thought. Maybe the congregation's not ready for it. But what is not helpful is to pout. There's a question about Ahab's behavior here. It's not too hard to spot when a person is pouting. Jezebel asked him, "Well, why are you acting this way?" And he basically says, "I didn't get what I wanted." Now, Ahab, as far as we know, didn't mention Ahab didn't mention Naboth's reason for refusing to sell the land. Covetousness has been conceived in Ahab's heart, and it is developing here. People want their own way no matter how small the thing is. Here is Ahab, a man of great wealth. He could certainly do without one little vineyard. And what about us? We become very upset because of a little thing we can't have. And all of our attention suddenly starts centering on attaining that object, that person, that wish. Covetousness has developed. Well, this is the conception of covetousness, and then we see the conspiracy of covetousness in verses 7 through 16. We have the planning of the conspiracy. Jezebel in this story shows how wicked she is. She says, "I'll give you what you want." And she could have very well said, "Just who's the king around here anyway?" Here's Ahab. He's king. He's acting like he has no power. Jezebel knows his power. What does she do? She schemes. She's very good at that. She writes letters in Ahab's name. And so there's dishonesty right there. She puts the official seal on them, indicating they are from Ahab. And these letters are sent to elders and nobles. These are the men who administered justice in their locality. Sends these letters to where Naboth lives. And the instructions in these letters is quite clear. There is a conspiracy here to kill Naboth, to put him to death. the plot is actually put in writing. We see the execution of the conspiracy. The men followed the instructions. Seems to be the easiest thing to do what the king says, even though it's wrong. And so these leaders were involved in the evil. Maybe they were afraid of Ahab and Jezebel. But in the letter, they were instructed to do certain things, and here's what they did. They called for a fast. Or they gathered together. They gave the impression that the city was laboring under or threatened with a curse because of some undiscovered sin. Naboth is set in a prominent place. It makes it appear that he's important. But then there is retributive justice. Naboth is denounced in the very hour of his triumph and exultation. This is all conspiracy against Naboth. He hasn't done anything wrong. As instructed, the leaders find two worthless men, scoundrels, sons of Belial. You had to have two witnesses to convict anybody of anything under the law of Moses. And so this gives the appearance of obeying God's law, but actually they're plotting an innocent man's death. And they charge that Naboth had cursed God and the king, blasphemy and treason. And when Naboth was put to death, he was stoned to death. The property would go to the king in this situation. Naboth was a victim of rigged charges in trial. It's reported to Jezebel about the evil deed being accomplished. We see the reaction to the conspiracy. Jezebel reports the death to Ahab. She says, "Go take possession." Naboth refused to sell it, but now you can have it for nothing. That's better than buying it. What was Ahab's reaction? Did he say, "Jezebel, you've gone too far this time"? No. He went to take possession of the vineyard. Let's consider the attitudes displayed here. Ahab, along with Jezebel, wanted their own way no matter who got hurt. They all wanted their own way no matter what is right. They wanted their own way no matter what had to be done to get their way. Sometimes the expression has been used, the end justifies the means. Well, no. A low value was placed on human life. A man was put to death for a vineyard. A big question in many people's minds is, how can I get what I want? I think that's one of the main questions that a lot of people ask today. How can I get what I want? How can I seduce that man's wife? How can I take that person's job? How can I get the church to do what I want? And so we see the conception of covetousness and the conspiracy of covetousness. But then we see the consequences of covetousness, verses 17 through 29. Well, first, an innocent man lost his life. How many innocent people are lost because of covetousness? Because of covetousness, there are broken marriages and homes. There's imprisonment for embezzling. And yes, even at church, there have been divisions, basically over opinion or personality clashes. Well, there are consequences for Ahab and Jezebel. They're going to be punished. Elijah delivers a message from God. And the story gets very unpleasant. They're told something about their deaths, and they're not going to get to die on their old age bed. Ahab is told that the dogs will lick his blood. We read on in Scripture that happened. He was injured in battle, he died. When they went to wash out the chariot, the dogs were there to lick up his blood. This was because the prophet said, "You sow yourself." But there will be more. His descendants will be cut off. He will lose the dynasty. And then what is God going to do with Jezebel? 11 years after Ahab's death, the prophecy about Jezebel comes true. She was killed by Jehu after he was made king. She painted up her face, adorned her head. She stood in an open window and taunted Jehu for being his master's murderer. Well, the officials just threw her out the window. She landed, she was trampled underfoot, and the dogs ate her body. I told you it was going to get gruesome. What a gruesome end to a wicked life. There's a reason for the evil, verses 25 and 26. There was never a man like Ahab who sold himself to do evil in the eyes of the Lord, urged on by Jezebel his wife. He behaved in the vilest manner by going after idols like the Amorites the Lord drove out before Israel. They weren't worshiping the true God. They had turned to idolatry. And they were worshiping themselves, in effect, seeking their own desires. Well, it's interesting that Ahab responds to the message that he's given. And he actually changes his ways. He tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, fasted, lay in the sackcloth, went around meekly. And so the word of the Lord comes to Elijah. Have you noticed how Elijah has humbled himself before me? Because he has humbled himself, I will not bring this disaster in his day, but I will bring it on his house in the days of his son. There would still be consequences for his sin, but it would be delayed until after his death. Still, there was calamity. You know, sin destroys people. And covetousness is like other sins. It causes destruction. Sometimes there's not an immediate punishment, but there are often bad consequences. Covetousness separates people from God. Important things become worthless. Trivial things become the most wanted desires. And covetousness will keep people out of God's kingdom, out of the kingdom of heaven. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 5, for this you know with certainty, that no immoral or impure person or covetous man who is an idolater has an inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and God. The covetous attitude destroys people spiritually. Well, 1 Kings chapter 21 records the case of the covetous king. We see the conception of covetousness, how desire got out of hand. We see the conspiracy of covetousness. They did anything necessary to get the coveted prize. And we see the consequences of covetousness. Covetousness will bring ruin and punishment. There's a story told about a snake who gave away gold. This was used in an ancient sermon as an illustration. And as the story goes, this man moved into a house when he was warned there is a poisonous snake in this house. You need to get rid of it. The man moves into the house with his wife and his child. And he's going to kill a snake. He's been warned to do that. He's going to kill a snake. But he finds that the snake has left him a gold coin. Well, I'll just be careful. And every day there's a gold coin that the snake has left. But before long, the snake bites and kills a serpent. Well, I've got lots of gold here. I can get another serpent. The gold continues, but before long the snake bites and kills the man's son. It goes on and on. Eventually, the snake bites the man. So the man says, okay, I'll mend my ways. I will kill the snake. And he recovers. Now the snake brings pearls. I can't kill the snake. He's bringing me pearls. And on it goes in the story until there is no more relief. The man is killed by the snake. I think covetousness is like that. It's like a snake giving away gold. A snake will bite you. That's what snakes do.